In today's video, I finally get out into the beautiful landscape around Edinburgh to show how I use focus stacking and patience to get a shot like this. I've come up to a gorgeous point in the Pentland Hills and it gives me this really nice view overlooking these pointy hills in the distance. Now, I've been up here a couple of times before quite recently and the conditions haven't been very good, but today we've got all these clouds moving overhead and so we're getting really interesting light sort of dappling, nearly fell over, across, where are we, these hills in the distance. But I've also been looking around for what would actually make for quite a nice composition in this scene, and the thing that's really stood out to me is this rock right here. This one. See it? That one. That one. I really like this scene and it stood out to me before when I've been up here, but in particular today because, as you can probably see, those hills in the distance are brighter than everything else, and it's that which is making them really stand out. As you can probably tell, it doesn't really work as a landscape composition because we've got this foreground here and it really works much better. And you're really focusing on this central column because that's where all the interest is, particularly with these like pointier hills in the distance. These ones are fine, but you know, they've been, you know, mown or sheared or whatever it is that causes all this sort of patchiness. And so they're not really the focus in this image. The focus is very much on these. Got my tripod a few feet off the ground for this shot, and I think it's where I get the best composition because we get a nice amount of detail between the rock and the hills. We get these good view of how these hills all sort of roll over each other. So basically this is the equivalent of the shot I'm getting on the camera at the moment. As you can see, by going low we still get this nice rock and the hills, but also the lower we go it starts to show less and less of the hills in the distance. It all sort of compresses it together like this, and so look what happens as we go just a few feet higher. We see more and more of that landscape. It doesn't change in like how these are lined up, how the rock and the hills, they're still very much lined up down the center, but it really changes how much we can see in the distance. So it's just about finding that sweet spot, and something like this I think is ideal. So let's just take a look at this on the back of camera. We can see my setup very clearly from here. We've got the rock as foreground here, and we've got the mountains sort of away in the top third of the frame. I accidentally took a photo. Because that rock is so much closer to the camera than the hills in the distance, it's very difficult to get both of them nice and sharp and in focus in one image. If I focus on the rock, which is only like 6 or 7 feet away from the camera, that's nice and sharp, but then the hills in the distance are not in focus. And of course, then if I focus on the hills, the rock isn't in focus, and I want the whole scene to be nice and sharp. It's a very simple technique to get around that, and it's called focus stacking, and that basically involves taking different photos, focusing at different points in the scene, and then blending them together in Photoshop. It's very easy to do, and that's what I'm going to show you now. It's very simple in this scene actually, and I've got my lens set to autofocus, which makes it even easier because all I need to do now is tap on the rock. It will focus, take the shot. It is actually very dark, so I may just lower that shutter speed a touch. Let's try that again. Focus on the rock, get the shot, and then we do another one, literally tap to focus on those mountains. I've actually been hanging around here for quite a while to wait for this light to change because when I first arrived there was no light on those hills, and as the clouds have started to move over, that light has just been shifting all the way along the hills, dappling different parts. Little bits of it have been catching, and when they really light up they look great and they really stand out. At the moment they're a little bit sort of dappled, which looks fine, but they're not quite glowing and really standing out in the scene. And because they are quite far away, if they're not really lit up, they're going to kind of get lost in this composition, and I don't want that. But I also don't want my foreground rock being all in darkness either, and at the moment there's no light falling on me here at all. I'm basically in complete shadow, so I think I'm going to hang around for 10 minutes or so to see if these clouds start to move and see if that light changes at all. There are big patches of blue over here, and there's a lot of light going on over here where the sun is. It's just about having that patience in hanging around and waiting for all of those elements to come together. And the 2 hours I had to spend on top of that hill waiting for the light gave me plenty of time to fly my drone around and try and capture some shots of me to make my videos look a little bit more interesting. And honestly, today I don't mind hanging around because it's gorgeous out here. Well, sort of gorgeous, it's a little bit grey, but it's just great being out. I haven't properly been out taking photos in so long. The last couple of times I have, I just didn't get anything. And to be honest, it's left me feeling a little bit underwhelmed and certainly like uninspired to go out. And it's just been announced this morning that Scotland's travel restrictions are being lifted this week. So it's looking like I'm going to be able to start traveling, going to other places in Scotland, doing a lot more landscape photography, and I'm really excited for that. But I want to basically be in a good frame of mind from a photography perspective. I want to be excited to go out and look for really great images, and I want to be excited for going out in all conditions and seeing new places. It's not just about going to places, it's about wanting to like have that, I suppose, like that artistic inspiration, that creative drive, whatever you want to call it. I've definitely been lacking in that recently, as I'm sure we all have at the moment. So hopefully it's going to be coming back. I think as the world opens up again, maybe so too will everyone's creativity. Because we've been bored for a long time. Well, I've been waiting for this light to change for over an hour now. Well over an hour. And actually it's getting worse and worse. Like there's just this big just blanket of grey over everything, and it's meaning that we're not getting any of that dappled light anymore. I've seen it kind of gently shift over the scene, but it's not really, it's just too dense to really let any light through, so it's only coming through in these tiny little patches. So I don't really know what to do. I could either just cut my losses and go back and have some food, or I can hang around for a little bit longer just in case, but it doesn't look promising. And usually I'm a big believer in that patience really pays off, and once you've kind of got a scene like this set up, you kind of hang around, wait for that light to change, and usually things will start to change and maybe look a little bit better. It's been a long time now, and I do think it's only really got worse, not better. I'm getting very hungry and I'm getting very, very cold. So maybe 10 minutes more and then probably call it quits. Of course, whenever you're doing any kind of stacked image like this, where you're taking multiple shots of the same frame, whether that's focus stacking, whether that's exposure stacking, whether it's time blending, it's really important that you lock your camera down on a tripod so that every shot you take is at least the same frame, and then when you blend those together it's going to match up really nicely. I just know that as soon as I pack up and leave, I'm just going to get that little spot of light on that hill. I'll be so annoyed. It only takes a second for like a little break in the cloud to allow one shaft of light to come down and just add that nice highlight on it, and then it'll go again. So I have to be ready watching for it. So I am going to keep on hanging around, but as far as the video is concerned, let's end it here and take these shots over into Lightroom and put them all together. So actually all of the work that we're going to do pretty much for the focus stacking anyway is going to be done in Photoshop, and these are the images I've chosen. There's this one and there's this one, and it's just very clear to see why we need to focus stack. In this shot we have got the rock absolutely pin sharp, tons of detail, but as we go into that distance, look at those mountains, very, very soft details. However, we look at our other shot, mountains pin sharp, but the rock is too soft. So That's why we need to combine the shots. The other good reason is that as I was waiting for that light to appear, and I got a little bit on the hills in the distance, it's not the best that I saw it, but it was the best I was able to capture, and I don't think it looks too bad. I love the light on this sort of mid-ground here, but obviously, as you can see, the rock hasn't been lit up at all, whereas in this shot, it very much is. So by blending these two together, we're also getting that nice blend of light sweeping its way across the landscape. But as I flicked this on and off, I do think there is some shift in the camera. They don't look quite like they've lined up. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start off by selecting both of these. I'm going to go to Edit, Auto Align Layers, and hopefully Photoshop should just be able to nudge those into place. And now if we flick those on and off, we can see very clearly that nothing is moving. Let's zoom in on these mountains, flick on and off again. They remain exactly in the right place. That's great. Obviously, we have lost a little bit of detail as it has moved those around, but that's fine. Okay, so let's turn this layer back on, and the way I'm going to combine these is actually going to be pretty straightforward. I am going to just use layer masks. So the way I'm going to do that, in fact, let's reorder these because this layer is actually the rock, and therefore in the bottom of the frame, so it kind of makes sense to have that as my bottom layer, so it all kind of lines up. That then is my top layer. So let's select this top layer. I'm going to click the Add Layer Mask button. That's going to fill it with white, and of course when you're using layer masks, white shows a layer, black hides it. So now I can use the gradient tool. It's set to black and white, and I can draw on top of this, and I can create a gradient, and that's all it took for me to combine those layers. Now, what I want to do now is just zoom in, and I think actually this has been really good. We've got a nice sharp line here. I think one of the problems that I have got is that I tried to do this layer stack, this focus stack, just using the two images. I took one of the rock and one of the mountain. And I think for the most part that was the right decision, but there is some of this mid-ground here, as you can see, which is not in sharp focus. I think really I should have taken another shot just on the brow of this hill and then the one in the distance, and combining those three would have been a bit better. I could always try getting the brush and painting with white. I can try and paint some of this back in, and actually I think it is a little bit sharper. So I can just gradually refine that gradient, but I don't want to go too far because I think there is still basically this stripe going across the middle where it's not in focus in either shot. So, although maybe it is a little bit more in focus on the other one, but we do start to lose some of that nice light as well. So, you know, I think it's okay. You know, we've got some good detail. Some of these grasses are nice and pin sharp, and obviously we've got a nice sharp line on this ridge line. So I am actually pretty happy with how that looks. And now if we look at our whole shot, we can see that it has merged those together. We've got light on the rock, light on the hills in the background. And so now, if we wanted to keep on working on this, we can simply go to Layer and Flatten Image, and then we can start working on it from there. And that is exactly what I did for this image. Once I'd flattened it, I was able to do the rest of my edits. I was able to do some dodging and burning to bring out some more of the detail on the hills in the background, and really emphasize the light and shadow going across the undulating hillside, as well as, of course, general exposure and color adjustments. And overall, I think it's a really, really nice shot. And we have got that pin sharp rock here. We've got pin sharp mountains in the background. Overall, a moody scene, and I think it was worth all the effort of being out on that hillside. But thank you so much for watching this video. It really was a pleasure to finally be able to go out and get some photos in the field. If you have enjoyed it, please do hit that like button, and definitely do consider subscribing if you don't already, because certainly now things are opening up again. I'm definitely looking forward to getting back out with my camera and doing a lot more landscape photography on location. So definitely lots of reasons to stick around. But for now, that's it from me, and I will see you next time.